Alright, so now we're ready to get our intake manifold on. We're going to use these gaskets from Edelbrock because that's what they recommend for that intake manifold. So we'll test fit it on the heads real quick. We just want to make sure there's no crazy mismatch in our ports. And you can see this gasket actually looks just about perfect for the porting that was done on these heads. Let's look at the intake now. I'll lay this on the intake and see, line up our bolt holes. You can see there's a fair bit of material from the intake that overlaps the gasket. So that means obviously that the intake port size is a little bit smaller than the head port size. For max performance, you'd really want to open this up. Gasket matching is what it's called. Kind of the easy way to do it is you use a spray paint and you paint over while you have the gasket laid on the intake just like this, and then you take your die grinder and open it up and get rid of all the paint. I don't think we're going to bother with it for this. It's just a nice peppy street motor. That gasket matching, you're not even going to see the difference unless you're bringing it up to the max RPM range. It's going to be perfect for us. Now if the mismatch were in the other direction where the cylinder head port is smaller than the intake port, then you really want to open up the cylinder head port, because if you think about it, as the air comes out of the intake, it's going to be hitting a wall, which is the excess material on the cylinder head. We're in the opposite camp there, so we're totally fine. In fact, there may even be some kind of benefit for low-end torque, because the smaller intake port size may help the intake charge velocity, which helps improve torque. So I don't know, but in our case it doesn't matter. We're just gonna run it as is. So we need to make sure both our mating surfaces are clean. Just run some acetone over. We also want to make sure the valley rails are clean of any oil. We're just going to be using RTV to seal these up. The cork style or rubber style end seals, in my opinion, are not good, even though they use them from the factory. Any kind of refresh or anything, I've never used them, and the RTV seems to hold up a lot better. So to prep our gaskets, we're going to use a little bit of RTV around the water passages. I like to use the right stuff. I've always had good luck with it, and it sets up nice and quick. Not that it matters for this, since it's supposed to go in the car. So we're just going to put a light, we're going to put a light coating around here. Just needs to be a skim coat. Just need a little bit. One thing to note is on their aluminum manifolds, Edelbrock says you shouldn't use any of the Felpro gaskets, because I guess the torque spec for these aluminum intakes are much lower than the iron ones, obviously. So the Felpro composite gaskets don't compress enough and they won't seal properly. So that's one thing to note. And we can lay this down. Hopefully our RTV is tacky enough to just hold it in place, but if not, we can throw some gasket cement or sticky non-hardening sealer or whatever, but looks like we're good here. Now we just need to put a nice solid bead on our pan rails. We want to make sure to get a good amount of gasket maker in the corners here. You don't need to be too shy. This is one of the places where it's hard to go overboard with RTV. Usually you want to use as little as you can, but here we gotta close a pretty good sized gap. Nice big bead will be fine. Alright, now we should be good to set our intake down. Double check our gasket alignment. We're looking good. And I'll try to set this down without disturbing the gasket. That should do it. Just want to make sure we're making good contact with the rail RTV. Looks like we are. Okay, now let's start threading our bolts in. And I got ARP bolts for these, and it was actually surprisingly missing a washer, so for now we'll put it in without, but let me take that back out and put one in. Right now I'm just running these all down just to where they're touching, and then we're going to go through the torque sequence recommended and torque them down. I believe the final spec is 20 foot-pounds, but obviously on a lot of these we're not going to be able to get a torque wrench, so it just needs to be close. So here is our torque sequence. We're going to torque to 25 foot-pounds in 2 steps. On most of these we can't even get a ratchet in there, so we'll just be doing this by feel. Obviously we're using a pretty small wrench, so it's not like we can damage anything, plus you just kind of get a feel for these things every time. Alright, should be good. I also like to tape up our carb opening, since we're not putting a carb on it yet, just to prevent anything from falling down in there. Alright, it's starting to look a little closer to an engine. Now that we've got the valve train all adjusted, we can also go ahead and put our valve covers on just to prevent any debris from falling in there. A lot of times it's kind of a pain in the car to get the gasket aligned with the holes and also get the valve cover aligned with the holes, so for this I picked up some valve cover studs, which makes life a little easier, helps align everything by itself. So we'll thread those in. A little taller than I would have liked, but it should work fine. And for our valve cover, got these crinkle black or whatever this type of paint is called. I'm not really one for having logos and brand names and stuff on valve covers, but surprisingly I couldn't actually find any without something like this, so this is what it's got. Obviously we still need to put the gasket on, but I'm still waiting for that to show up actually. So for now, we'll just get the cover on there to keep stuff out. Looks like it needs to get bent in a little bit, but there we go. We may need to do a little bit of clearancing with the baffle and the rockers, but for now we'll just leave it covered. Alright, next up we need to get our timing cover on. Alright, so unfortunately our timing cover isn't all shiny and new like the rest of our parts, but it's going to work just fine for us. We do need to put our new front seal in, so we'll just use a big seal driver. There is a step on the back side, so we're not going to be able to drive it in too far, which makes it nice and easy for us. Get it squared up. Really wants to go on crooked. There we go. See if it's bottomed out all the way around. See the lip. It's flush around the whole diameter, circumference I guess. So there we go, we got our new seal in. Okay, let's get our timing cover on. We've got this Velcro rubberized steel gasket we're going to use. And since we're just reusing the Magnum timing cover, we'll just reuse the bolts also. I think some of the studs are for holding like wiring harness stuff on. So we'll just not need to use some of the studs, that's okay. So the shorter studs I think go down here. And we've got these two. I believe this bolt goes here. And this stud goes here. But we're going to need to put some non-hardening thread sealer on these. I just have those sorted in to keep the cover kind of in place. I'm going to use the Permatex Aviation stuff. It works pretty good on bolts that go into cooling jackets. You can see the remnants of what they used in the factory. Let's get these lightly snug. So these timing covers don't have any kind of locating dowel. You can see how much it rattles around on there. It's a good idea to put the harmonic damper on because that will locate the front main seal where it needs to be, and then we can snug these bolts down. So we'll want to pre-lube our front seal. Then I went ahead and got a new damper just for peace of mind because the elastomer on these kind of wears out and the inner ring can spin relative to the outer ring. We'll just run our bolt in to pull it tight. It's 1.25 inches. There we go. That's tight enough for now. You can see it took up a lot of free play in our timing cover. You tighten the cover up first and then put the balancer in. If the cover is not exactly concentric with the crank snout, then the seal is going to be forced over due to the misalignment. So one lip will be under tension and the other won't be, and it may leak. So this is just a good practice thing. While we're here, we may as well put our new water pump on. Got an AC Delco unit. Our sealing surface isn't really too pitted up. It's got some staining, but overall it's pretty good, so I don't think we're going to need to use any RTV. On timing covers that have some pits or anything, it's a good idea to coat that side of the gasket with some RTV because it just seals up any imperfections. I also went ahead and got some new water pump bolts. Dorman makes a kit with new bolts for these. Go ahead and line up our gasket. There we go. So our longest bolts come pre-applied with thread sealer because they go straight into the water jacket here. And then we just have the smaller bolts. They're all the same size, which makes it easy. These are all 9/16. Just try to snug them up evenly. Wow. See how many times I can hit the pole. Okay, water pump's on. And now that our timing cover is finally on, we can put the oil pan because the front of the timing cover also acts as one of the pan rails. So let's flip the motor over. Now before the pan goes on, we do have one slightly important component, and that's the oil pump. So I went ahead and got a new one. Usually old ones are fine to reuse. You can pop this cover off, and there's just a rotor that spins in here. And more often than not, they're totally fine. I mean, they have the easiest life in the world. They spin while fully immersed in oil. So usually they're fine, but a new one is cheap enough for milling. This is just a standard volume, standard replacement. Usually it's not a good idea to get a high pressure or high volume unless you know that you need it. That's usually for if you're running real loose bearing clearances for race applications or whatever. This is just a normal street motor, so normal pump it is. It's an M72 milling. On these small block Mopars, it seats into the rear main cap, and you can see we've got this little bushing for the pump drive, so we need to make sure that goes in easy. It slides in just like butter, so we're good there. So we're going to temporarily set this down. I'll thread one of these bolts in just to hold it, because we still need to put our oil pump pickup on. Since we're changing from the Magnum pan, which is a truck pan, into a car, we need to go back to the small block LA pan for a car, which means we need a different oil pump pickup. Melling does make them. They're easily available. There's the part number. And easy for us, they're threaded, so we don't have to deal with tack welding or anything like that. There's our approximate position. We're actually going to need to pop this back off. Thread this in, make sure all is good. It is like a pipe thread, so there's that. Alrighty. So now we'll temporarily bolt this in. So what we need to do is locate the pickup so that it's about parallel with the block. That's pretty close. And actually we want the pickup to slightly touch the oil pan. That keeps it from backing out or doing anything weird. Plus you get maximum oil pickup, obviously, if you're at the bottom. So we're going to test fit our pan and see how we're looking. So this pan is Summit Racing's just normal car pan. I can feel that we're touching. You see the pan's not sitting straight onto the block. It rattles a little bit and you can feel it pivoting right there. That's how we know it's actually touching the pan slightly, so that's perfect. Now that we have the pickup position squared away, we can put our oil pump bolts in and tighten them. Personally, I like to throw a little bit of Loctite on them, just blue Loctite. You don't really need to, but it's just some extra peace of mind. These are not something you want to back out. And these are just 9/16 bolts. And you don't need a gasket on oil pump flanges. Usually they're machined so that they actually don't need one. So from the factory they didn't come with one. Alright, we should be good there. Alright, time for our oil pan and gasket. Obviously we want our pan rails to be nice and clean. Use acetone or degreaser or whatever to get all of the oil off. And then one other thing to keep in mind is over here at the rear main cap, we're going to want to remove any RTV that's squeezed into the hole or the little divot between the block and the cap, because when we put the seal in, we put RTV in there, so that's going to interfere with actually allowing the seal to go all the way into the groove. So since we're having to use a 360 LA pan to fit into the car, since there's not really a Magnum pan that will fit into the car, there may be one, but it would be a special item that's probably pretty expensive compared to a normal 360 pan. We need to use 360 LA gaskets. The only real difference between the LA and the Magnum oil pans is that the LA pan has a cutout right here in the front, which you can see is taken up with a bit of rubber on the front part of the seal. If you compare that to a Magnum gasket, which is what this one-piece one is, it's missing that big step up. So we're going to have to go with the LA gasket, the 4-piece one. I don't know if they make a one-piece. I usually like to use the one-piece a lot better because it removes any variability and questions about the sealing. With the 4-piece oil pan gaskets, you got to really make sure you seal them right. So I like to start by putting the rear seal in. But before we do that, we'll put a little bit of RTV in the groove. Then we'll set a rubber end seal on. And spread some gaskets either over the top. That's where the cork's going to overlap. And this is the main leak prone area where all the seals overlap. So we want to make sure we do a good job sealing up between the two. So now we'll lay down one of our seals for the rail. Put some more RTV on top here. Then up on the front corner, the rubber seal goes into the pan first. So looks like we're actually going to need to maybe cut a little bit off the cork. You can see here to get the bolt holes to line up, there's a little bit of cork that needs trimmed off. So we'll line this up to where it needs to be and make our cut. That should do it. And just like the other side, we'll put some RTV on the underside, and then on top where the rubber seal is going to meet. Make sure our cork is lined up all the way along the rail. I'm going to put a little dab on the center just to keep it from moving. I have heard of some guys completely doing away with the cork and just doing a big bead of RTV. That probably does seal up fine, and it may even be a little less weep prone than cork, because after, you know, a lot of years, cork kind of gets saturated and it'll weep a little bit of oil out. But I hate cleaning RTV personally, so doing that just sounds like a nightmare if it ever needs another pan. So cork's been used for 150 years or whatever, it works fine. If you can get a one-piece rubber, that's the way to go, but this should work okay for us. So now we'll do the other rail and then we'll drop the pan on. Alright, so now for the front seal on the pan, I put just a little smear of RTV on the cutouts, and you can see our rubber seal has these little pins that stick out. They go into the holes on the pan. So stick those to the holes. Looks like they're one directional. Got it backwards. So I want to make sure the lip on the seal actually goes over the pan where it needs to go, and then we're probably going to need these pliers to pull the little end plugs through. We'll just yank. There it goes. And that side. Alright, now on goes the pan. Make sure all of our holes stay lined up. And we'll start threading our oil pan bolts in. Alright, now I'll go ahead and just snug these all down evenly. I gotta say, a lot of these more basic, standard stamped pans have bolt hole alignment issues, but this Summit Racing one is pretty much dead on the money, so kudos to them on that. Definitely reasonable price, happy with the quality. These don't need to get torqued super tight, just hair over snug, and they'll be good. You can put a torque wrench on these. I think the spec is right around 15 foot-pounds, but it's not like it's a critical fastener. Alright, we wipe off our excess RTV. And one last thing, the plug on this came loose. I'm sure I would forget to do that once it was in the car, so we'll go ahead and tighten it up. One other thing we had to do while the engine's upside down is put our oil filter plate back on. So I want to make sure everything, all the paint and whatnot, is away from our gasket surface. Then we got this little flat paper seal. It sits down on here. Then our plate, and finally our stud. It's got a 1-inch hex on it. Doesn't need torque to the moon, just nice and tight. Alright, with our pan on, the last thing we're going to put on before this gets dropped in the car is the distributor. It doesn't really need to go in, it's just good to fill that hole because we don't want any junk falling in there. So to start off with, we're going to spin the motor over to number 1 top dead center. And we do still need to tighten our harmonic damper bolt, but we'll do that at the same time we put the flex plate on. Never mind. Alright, so this is nice. This damper, the aftermarket one, actually has a bunch of timing marks. I don't know if you can see that very well. So in addition to the marks on the cover, we have the marks on the damper. We're going to go 10 before top dead center. So right now we're at 10 degrees before top dead center. And then we're going to drop the distributor in. And we won't need to rotate the motor again, hopefully. But it's not a huge deal to reset if we do before we get a drop in the car. Alright, so we need to drop our intermediate shaft in first. It's this thing. We want to double check that our bushing is actually still in place. Which it is. And it's also already oiled. So we'll carefully drop that down. Rotate it until it locks in to the oil pump. Should be good there. And then for the distributor itself, we're going with this Pertronix flamethrower distributor. They're fine, and some guys say they have issues with them, a lot of guys say they don't, so we're going to give it a go. I worked on a Mustang with it once and it worked flawlessly, so it's a decent, simple electronic ignition. So this is simple enough. Just drops on in, and I forgot to add, you definitely want to lubricate the cam gear before you drop the intermediate shaft in. That's definitely important. So usually a good rule of thumb is you want the rotor to face towards cylinder number 1. Which, there we go. Vacuum advance. Probably the best positioning. It's going to be that way. Possibly that way. But we can figure that out when we go to put all of our plug wires in. For now, we're just going to set this in here, just to keep junk from falling in. And the nice thing about these Pertronix distributors is the wiring is dead simple. There's no ignition box or anything you need to mount. It's literally just the coil and these 2 wires, plus obviously power and ground, which makes it super easy to wire up. Very clean. So with that, we just about got this thing ready to drop in the car. We got a couple odds and ends to do that are easier done off the stand, like tightening the harmonic damper bolt. Got to do that. Got to install our flex plate and install some plugs in the back of the engine. that are kind of hard to get to while it's on the stand. Next time we're going to be working on getting the transmission together for this car. I've already got an A727 core that we're going to be rebuilding for this. I'll be going through and rebuilding that step by step, so I'll see you guys then.